A Jock Has No Place in the Theater. Written by Tansy Bells. Read by Arashi. Soleil gets pulled in to play Romeo last minute, and Ophelia, Juliet, is super frustrated by a jock coming into her beloved theater scene and defiling it. The more they work together, though, the more Ophelia allows herself to understand Soleil and why she's so frustratingly earnest. When Ophelia gets the email, she can't believe her eyes. Sophie, poor brain-dead Sophie, had fallen from her horse and broken her leg, thus making it impossible for her to carry out her role as the titular Romeo in the homecoming production of Romeo and Juliet. It had been a bit of a stretch, in Ophelia's opinion, to cast her in the first place, but they had begun to form a fictional bond over the past few months of rehearsals. But it had never been as much of a stretch as it would be to cast Soleil as her replacement. Everyone with a brain on the campus of Valla Women's College knew who Soleil is. She's the star of the rugby team, a regular Casanova who flirts with anything with boobs, and a student with average to questionable grades at best. But just because Ophelia knows who Soleil was, doesn't mean she wants to work with her. She is so sweaty. And, most importantly, she is not an actress. Her mother is a singer. Caladori, the student director, points out when Ophelia marches up and makes her opposition known. And her father's a dancer. Performance is in her blood. "You don't know that!" Ophelia shrieks, affronted. But Caladori just shrugs, flips over a page on her clipboard, and returns to the process of intimidating the set builders into achieving perfection. So, Ophelia turns her sights onto Soleil herself. The only way to reliably know where she is, though, is to find her during sports practice. Immediately, her mood is soured even further, because she has to shoulder her way through the throngs of mindless oohing and eyeing sycophanatic fans, pressed up against the edge of the rugby field just to see her. From that point, she is able to see Soleil training in nothing but pants and a sports bra. Of course she's skins when they're playing shirts versus skins. The girls around her titter. Ophelia sneers at the shimmering bulge of her muscles, the way the air around her seems to glitter when she tosses her ponytail back and out of her face. She flashes a beaming smile towards her fan club, and the girls around her practically swoon. She is beautiful, resplendent, in her mid-practice sweatiness. Ophelia resents her already. So, of course, Soleil singles her out when practice is over. Ignoring the rest of the clamoring girls, she jogs over while toweling her hair off. That same overwhelming smile is now focused solely on her, and Ophelia squirms. "Hey there, beautiful," she calls out, amusement dancing in her eyes as she looks down at Ophelia. "You're new here, aren't you? I've never seen you here before." "Of course you wouldn't have." Ophelia sniffs. She actually has valuable things to do with her time. "I'm here to tell you to drop out of the homecoming play. Nay, I insist, demand, that you withdraw your name from consideration." Soleil isn't even looking her way anymore. "See you Thursday!" she shouts out to the departing teammates, with a wave, before turning back to Ophelia. "Aw, sweetheart, you don't mean that." She finishes wringing out her hair, and lets the towel drape haphazardly around her shoulders. With burning cheeks, Ophelia pointedly looks away from the way the edges dangle around her chiseled abs. She's seen girls changing in the dressing room. They help each other out with finicky costumes all the time, but she's never seen abs like that. "I very much do. As a—" Ophelia shudders. "Jock, your inclusion in the homecoming play, a long and hallowed tradition of showcasing the best our illustrious theater department has to offer, completely defeats the purpose. Simply shoving you into a role negates the opportunity to find someone else who would suit it better." "Yeah, gotcha." Soleil doesn't sound like she gets What has Ophelia so incensed? Anyways, I can't just drop. You guys are already in a tight spot, and Calidori asked me specifically. Peeling off the gloves she wore to protect her hands while roughhousing, like the heathen she undoubtedly is, she reaches out to pat Ophelia's shoulder. It is probably supposed to be a reassuring gesture. Ophelia finds it anything but. Even so, she can't deny the truth of what Soleil said. They are in a pinch, and it had been foolish of them to not prepare at least one understudy for a titular role. Maybe Calidori is right to see something in the other girl as base as her fans seem to be. At least Soleil's inclusion will guarantee tickets sold. She shrugs off the hand with a thinly disguised curl of her upper lip. Fine, she snaps. Rehearsal is tonight at 6:30. Don't you dare be late. And then, the horror, the gall. Soleil cocks her head to the side and grins at her in a manner Ophelia found revoltingly charming. Calidori said it wasn't until Friday night, though. It's Wednesday. Calidori may think your acting skills are up to snuff based purely on your parentage, but I can assure you that I most certainly do not. As I am Juliet, it's imperative that we make sure our onstage chemistry is— Her explanation is quickly cut off by a new gleam in Soleil's burgundy eyes. Before Ophelia can react, Soleil steps around to sling her arm across Ophelia's shoulders. She squeezes her close, just a little bit, but the sudden increase in pressure is more than enough to cause Ophelia to freeze in place like a cat caught up in its owner's arms to have its claws trimmed. Hold up, Soleil murmurs in her ear, and a traitorous chill runs down Ophelia's spine. You mean to say that I get to go up on stage with a beauty like you? Well, that is, there's kissing in Romeo and Juliet, right? Ophelia's jaw drops. She hadn't even— How could she have accepted the role without having even read the script? That's what she wants to be upset about. But instead, her brain decides to betray her, just like her nervous system, and ply her with thoughts of— Unaware of Ophelia's new and sudden plight, Soleil presses her lips together thoughtfully, lips which Ophelia is now arrested by a horrible interest in. As Soleil opens her mouth to continue talking, Ophelia couldn't help but look away. Her lips are surprisingly plush. Does she moisturize? Exfoliate? She'd thought a rugby player like Soleil, constantly on the field and braving the harshness of the outdoors, wouldn't know the first thing about skincare. And yet— Meet you. Ophelia blinks back to the conversation, only to see Soleil looking at her with that same boundless intensity. What? I said, where should I meet you for rehearsal night? I'd suggest your room, but who knows what we might get up to in there. Finally, Ophelia's sanity returns to her. She squirms out from Soleil's one-sided embrace with an undignified little noise that she refuses to acknowledge could ever come out of her mouth. There's no way in hell she can carry out rehearsal with this woman in a one-on-one setting. She quickly realizes. Forget about tonight, she finally chokes out. I'll see you at rehearsal on Friday, 5 p.m., the auditorium in the Performing Arts Center. Cool, I'll see you there. Promise secured, Ophelia whips around to return to her own duties. She is supposed to be in class right now, actually. This issue had simply taken significant precedence. But while she isn't quick enough to miss the easy wink Soleil threw her way, she fails to notice the heavy sigh that escapes the rugby player as soon as her back is turned. Soleil joins their next rehearsal. Immediately, Ophelia hates it. The rest of the cast and crew are nowhere near as immune to Soleil's easy charm as Ophelia is. Not only is there far too much swooning for aspiring professionals to be engaging in, but Soleil accepts it all with a smile. They began, obviously, with a read-through of the script. Doing this without the blocking puts them behind on schedule, but Calidore insists that it is necessary for Soleil to familiarize herself with the cadence of Shakespeare. Much to Ophelia's surprise, it's fine. Soleil is stilted and awkward at first, but she soon falls into the theatrics Shakespeare demands. It helps that she has the rest of the cast to learn from and mimic. Ophelia would be impressed. If only Soleil wouldn't wink at Ophelia during her most salacious lines. The only thing to make up for it is the absolutely devastated expression on Soleil's face when she finds out they both die at the end. "I thought this was supposed to be a love story!" she exclaims when the reading is done. "It is." Ophelia looks away derisively. She makes eye contact with Calidore, who, to her dismay, looks moderately impressed with Soleil's performance thus far. "It just so happens to be a love story, crouched in great tragedy. They might have even been happy, if only their families could look past their fight." "Oh, I see." Soleil looks thoughtful. She looks like she's about to ask a follow-up question, but Calidore rises and claps her hands together, announcing that it's time to start rehearsing the blocking. Everything falls apart after that. Her grace from the field is still there. She moves exactly when and where she's supposed to. Why, everything is fine, if a bit awkward, as long as Soleil is the only lead on stage. The instant Ophelia steps onto the stage, however, she cracks. Her womanizing talents fail her. She stops and starts like a robot running out of energy, choking on her words. Even when she has her script in hand, she forgets her props constantly. Later on, when she has lines that should be memorized, it's only Ophelia's scenes that she forgets. It's insulting. Hadn't Ophelia clearly expressed to her the expectation she had for the production when confronting her upon the rugby field? She can't help but think that Soleil is doing everything in her power to embarrass her. It would be one thing if she was horrible in all the scenes she's in, but no, it's only Ophelia. Only Ophelia. Why her? Was it because she'd told her off before rehearsal started? How ridiculous. She thought jocks were supposed to deal with stage fright all the time. They don't call it that, of course. They call it performance anxiety. And then they go out on the field to perform anyway. Ugh. Even when it comes time to rehearse kissing scenes, which Ophelia truly expected Soleil to shine in given her reputation, the woman is stiff and wooden. Ophelia had better kisses when practicing with the back of her hand in secondary school. Truly, she's incorrigible. The weeks pass. Soleil memorizes her lines. She performs her blocking. She excels at swordplay. She looks like she's beginning to enjoy the thrill of the theater. And yet, she's still so awkward around Ophelia. "What was that?" Ophelia snaps after practice one day, when the rest of the cast and crew were gone, and even Calidore had left for the night. Soleil is perched on the edge of the stage, and she knocks her heels in an off-kilter rhythm against the hard supports holding it up. "What was what?" Soleil doesn't look up. She simply keeps knocking her heels against wood. "What was that?" Ophelia gestures towards the stage, towards the ghost of a cast that only she can see in her mind's eye. "It was awful! Worse than awful! It was abysmal! I don't understand why you're having such a difficult time with this." Only then does Soleil look up. Not for the first time does Ophelia find herself mildly distracted by the color of her co-star's luminous eyes, but for the first time she notices the wideness of the whites around them, how nervous she seems to be as she asks, "I did everything you told me to do, didn't I?" That gives Ophelia pause. "Well, yes," she succeeds. "Just not well. That's the problem, see? This has to be perfect. And don't misunderstand me, you certainly look perfect." She'd have to be blind to miss how dashing Soleil looks when in costume. Something about the hat, the knee-high boots, everything. She looks as stunning in all of her clothes as she did on that first day at the rugby field, when she'd been wearing next to nothing. And yet, Soleil isn't pleased by this admission, where normally she would be preening all over, gushing that Ophelia gave her a compliment. Instead, she simply deflates, her broad shoulders dropping down further than Ophelia has ever seen before. I know. She isn't smiling. Ophelia has never seen Soleil without her signature smile before. Now that she has, she can't shake the feeling that the universe is fundamentally broken without it. Sorry. I'll try to do better next time. She tries to offer Ophelia a smile, tries to right the universe's wrongs, but it's too thin and watery to hold any true meaning. There's just been a lot on my mind is all. I'll be okay tomorrow, right as rain. Ophelia laughs. You're a horrible actress, she says as kindly as she can manage. I don't believe you one bit. That's just the thing, isn't it? None of Soleil's acting is believable. She can memorize all of the lines, perform the blocking with absolute precision. But there simply isn't that spark. There isn't that special something that allows the audience to completely immerse themselves in the world of their performance. There are glimmers of it, here and there when a Soleil interacts with the ensemble, but it always seems to dissipate the instant she turns to face Ophelia, which, considering the fact that Ophelia plays Juliet of the titular Romeo and Juliet, is the root of their problems. It is as though the instant Soleil remembers she was supposed to be acting, not just interacting with people, any inherent skill she might have had melts away like snow in summer. Ophelia walks up to the edge of the stage. With a dainty sigh, she sits down right beside Soleil. Tell me what's wrong, she orders. When Soleil gives her a doubtful, sidelong look, she scoffs in mock offense. What? Clearly we are incapable of resolving anything as long as you bottle yourself up like this. So, come on, tell me. In an attempt to alleviate Soleil's mood, she nudges the other girl's side with her elbow. Soleil looks like she is about to shake her head, or worse, abscond, but Ophelia catches her out. I am used to day-long rehearsals, Soleil, she says in the haughtiest tone of voice she could muster. I can keep going forever and ever until my goal is accomplished. She punctuates her words with additional nudges until, finally, Soleil chuckles. Ophelia shoves down the warm, relieved pride that bursts in her chest at hearing the tiny noise and nudges her again, a little harder this time. Fine, Soleil says. Just give me a second, all right? Ophelia remains dutifully silent while Soleil collects her thoughts. She is painfully curious. She won't lie, but she also knows the value of a dramatic pause. When she is ready, Soleil straightens from her hunched position. She rolls her shoulders back, cracks her neck, and launches into it. I don't know how much Calidori told you about my family, but they're big performers. My mom's a singer. My dad and grandma, they're both dancers. Good ones, too. She snorts. Even my little brother. He's double majoring in theater and vocal performance. Ophelia lifts a brow, curious, but Soleil notices it before she can school it back down. Not here, obviously. He's at Ulisse University. Despite herself, Ophelia finds herself impressed. Ulisse isn't a competitor to Valla Women's per se, but their theater programs are certainly within a similar echelon. Ophelia had actually considered going there herself, seeing how several members of her own family were alumni. But me? I've never really been good at that sort of thing. So when Calidori asked me to fill in for Sophie, it felt like it was my chance to prove myself, be someone that fit in with my family, even if my mom and dad keep telling me I didn't need to. Ophelia lifts a brow, I have a hard time imagining you fitting in anywhere. The way she stands out amongst the crowd is part of her charm, but Ophelia would rather perish before admitting anything of the sort. That's the thing, Soleil says. Sometimes it works in my favor. Pretty girls like you, they notice me, and that's nice. But that doesn't exactly make my family proud. Your position as star of the rugby team doesn't make your family proud? Ophelia deadpans, in an attempt to make Soleil see reason, but it only makes her wilt a little more. They're theater people. Theater people! You don't get sports. Ophelia can't tell if that's supposed to be a criticism or simply a statement of fact. She decides upon the latter. More importantly, she decides she's done with Soleil's self-pity. It's holding both her and the entire production back from success. Quite frankly, it's pissing her off. What don't I get about sports? She asks. I certainly understand the rise and fall of emotions as you approach the deciding moment of a performance, whether it is scripted or not. That doesn't change the rush of adrenaline as you prepare for the moment where you either succeed or fail. It doesn't change the importance of one's team members. Both sports and the dramatic arts are built upon skill, honed to the point where the audience can't help but stare in awe. So I ask you, Soleil, what's the difference? When her impromptu soliloquy draws to a close, and she is no longer possessed by the spirit of drama itself, Soleil is staring at her. You're right, she murmurs. There isn't that big a difference after all, is there? Not at all. The thing is, you've had a coach to help you learn your sport, haven't you? Ophelia sighs. You were thrust upon a stage without any assistance. We've all been so busy with the performance that I failed to give your situation a moment's notice. I thought that you would be fine simply based upon your debonair attitude. Soleil remains silent, and Ophelia knows she has hit the mark. It was unfair of us to make that assumption. So, don't quit quite yet. She offers a tiny smile to the other woman. I'll help you, all right. We can practice one-on-one. I'll give you some pointers. I'll help you without the burden of my assumptions to hold us back. You'd really do that? Soleil looks at her like she's hung the very stars in the sky. Really? You aren't messing with me, right? Yes, really. And no. She pulls a face. I'm not messing with you. Suddenly, and without warning, Ophelia finds herself wrapped in the greatest, warmest hug she has ever experienced. Did you know? Soleil admits into her shoulder, and Ophelia is relieved to hear the hints of the other girl's boisterous nature leaking back into her voice. I was actually going to talk to her after practice and see if there was something else I could help with. Maybe take a smaller part. Let someone else who could actually act be Romeo. She looks up at Ophelia with a slowly growing smile. And then the prettiest lady marched onto my turf and demanded I do just that. Maybe I would have listened if she hadn't been so beautiful when she shouted at me. Ophelia can't believe her ears. You mean, if I hadn't done anything today, you wouldn't be Romeo? You would have quit? Yeah. Much to her surprise, the thought of Soleil quitting her role is a disquieting one. She hadn't exactly been stellar so far, but Ophelia supposes that she's had time to acclimate to the thought of Soleil in the role. She certainly looks the part, and as soon as Ophelia knocks some skill into her, she'll act it too. She'll be perfect. She looks away. Well, then I'm glad I said something. Somehow, that's the thing to catch Soleil off kilter. Her little smile grows into something more luminous than a spotlight, than the stars, than the moon, than the sun. You're glad? With her sun-bright smile, Soleil leans in and shoves her shoulder against Ophelia's. Instead of her usual unbridled strength, though, it was light, affectionate, almost. Soleil gently lay her head down on Ophelia's shoulder before Ophelia could actually think of the best word for it, much less the way she felt about it. Never thought I'd see the damn day. You? Happy I'm here? What can I say? Ophelia sniffs in turn. You've grown on me, like mold. Something changes after that. Soleil has always been free with her affection, loose with her smiles. That doesn't change. Ophelia doesn't think it ever could. But whenever she glances Ophelia's way, that smile gets a little more sincere. If she hadn't known better, she'd almost think Soleil is being shy around her. Had it been this way all along? The awful, wooden awkwardness that had plagued the stage ever since Soleil had been brought upon it. Had it all been awkwardness around Ophelia herself? Such difficult thoughts fly out the window once Ophelia makes good on her promise to work one-on-one with Soleil. By the time Ophelia is satisfied enough to stop their private rehearsals, Soleil isn't perfect. She doesn't think she ever will be. But she is good enough for a small women's college homecoming production of Romeo and Juliet. And soon enough, that homecoming weekend arrives. I don't see them, Soleil chews on her bottom lip as she peers out into the crowd from backstage. They're supposed to be here by now. They'll be here, Ophelia says, placing a warm hand on her co-star's shoulder and squeezing gently. This is normal. Everyone gets opening night jitters. Everyone? Soleil turns away from the crowd and gives Ophelia a skeptical look. Even you? Ophelia can only laugh. Even me. She returns Soleil's skepticism with a deeply held secret. I threw up during my first performance. I was so nervous. As long as you don't do that, I am certain that you will be just fine. Shaking her head, Soleil looks back into the audience. Ophelia is in the middle of racking her mind for further platitudes and reassurances, when all of a sudden, Soleil grabs her upper arm tightly. They're here, she hisses, and she points out towards the auditorium doors. My family! It would take a blind woman to miss them. Ophelia realizes that she's seen Soleil's mother before. Azura is a famous soloist, and Ophelia can't believe she never recognized the blue of Soleil's hair before. Inigo she is less familiar with, though she certainly witnessed a few shrines in his image being set up in the dancers' hall when finals roll around. She simply never put two and two together to get Soleil. It makes increasing sense why Soleil had been so nervous about performing well. A striking young man follows after her parents. It must be the brother she mentioned, Shigure. But that's not all. After her brother comes the entire rugby team. Soleil's face pales under her stage makeup, and she swears, They said they were supportive, but I didn't realize they were coming. Her breath is starting to pick up, and Ophelia hurries to soothe her. It doesn't change anything, she says calmingly, as Soleil's guests take their seats. See, my father is out there as well. She points Owain out. It's all right. Your family and friends aren't here to judge you. They want to see you do something you worked hard at. Soleil looks at her sidelong, doubtful. What happened to me being good enough? You are good enough, Ophelia sniffs. I should know. I trained you. Do you truly believe I would let you walk out onto that stage if I weren't? Soleil blinks. Then she bursts into laughter so hard that Ophelia can see her parents look up towards the crowd at the sight. Ophelia drags her further backstage, out of pure kindness, while Soleil wipes faint tears from the corners of her eyes. Thankfully, she doesn't smudge her makeup. You're right. You wouldn't have let me on stage if I wasn't good enough. Ophelia nods curtly. Precisely. She smiles at Soleil as the theater lights begin to go down. The crowd hushes, and the narrator walks on stage. Two households, they proclaim with great seriousness, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona where we lay our scene. It is a while before either of them make their appearance on stage, but Soleil takes a deep breath. She settles herself, just like Ophelia showed her how to, and by the time of her first entrance, Soleil is excited to get started. Just as expected, her performance isn't perfect, but just like everything else Soleil does, she does it with heart. Ophelia wonders for the first time whether, where Soleil is concerned, her heart might have been enough for them to succeed after all. It certainly seems to be the case, if the pounding in her chest as she interacts with her on stage is anything to go by. "You did it!" she proudly whispers to Soleil as they take their final bows of their first ever performance. Out in the audience, if she squints, she can see Soleil's family cheering and clapping, hear her team hooting and hollering at their pride. If she weren't on stage, Ophelia feels like she might be right alongside them. In a more dignified manner, of course. She carries herself with dignity her own father doesn't, if his excitement is anything to go by. "We did it," Soleil confirms, and reaching out to her, takes Ophelia's hand. With a burning face, Ophelia lets her. The end. Thank you for listening.